I mentioned that I was lucky enough to be here in 2010 to cover the 2010 FIFA Men's World Cup. It's been more than 12 years since what I would call one of the most glorious celebrations of football that I've ever witnessed. I remember from the opening goal and Sif Chabalala's wonder goal against Mexico all the way through to the final. And actually, my favourite player of all time, Don Andrés Iniesta, scoring that winning goal for Spain in extra time against the Netherlands to make them world champions for the first time. But we're a dozen or so years on from that. So where are we at with the sort of 50-plus confederations that are part of the Confederation of African Football? How can they continue to prosper? How can they continue to progress? Both in terms of performing on the very biggest of global stages as well as in their own countries. And it's all those details, improving the infrastructure, opening up those opportunities, and really growing the game. So let's find out in the company of our next group of speakers. And we have 3 for you plus our moderator in this next panel. So please welcome the Secretary General from COSAFA, Sue Destombes, the Chief Operating Officer at the South Africa FA, Lydia Monyepao, and also the Deputy General Secretary at the Zambia FA, Joseph Chimpampwe, and your moderator for this session, Head of Sports, Entertainment and Tech Legal Practice at OAL Law, Beverley Agbakoba-Onyejianya. Please welcome them to the stage. Thank you very much, ladies and gents. The main challenges for tenable growth and success for African football associations. I'm sure there'll be many pairs of ears pricked up in this room, ready to hear every single word that's about to be uttered. Over to you. Thank you very much indeed, Beverley.
Thank you so much, David. I am so excited to be here today. And I've got this panel of illustrious veterans of sports administration in Africa. I think this is a conversation that many of us have been waiting to have, because at the end of the day, we cannot underestimate the influence of good sports administration and governance in Africa. And as we all know, what is sports administration all about? These are the gatekeepers of sport. They ensure accessibility to the sport, they keep it transparent, they ensure the rules of the games are enforced, and also inclusion and diversity. But unfortunately, we know the real story of sports administration in Africa. It's plagued by crisis in leadership. It's plagued by issues with age fraud. It's plagued by corruption, and the list goes on. But today, we really want to get into solutions. We're not just here to complain about the challenges, we're also here to hear from these experts in their game, so to speak, about what they are doing in their regions to enhance the game and develop the game. So I'm going to start with Sue. And as a veteran in the game, over 30 years experience, you've pivoted from insurance into sports administration. What would you say would be the ideal structures for running a good sports association in Africa? What does it take to have good sports administration?
I think you've got to have, obviously, an organogram that works, that cascades down. The chief executive, a secretary general, or whatever you want to call the person. Ideally to have a right-hand person, like we have with Joe, a good COO to make sure that things are happening on the ground, and then the necessary departments for any football association. Obviously, competitions is the lifeblood. It's your core business, but alongside that is your finance, your marketing, your communications, etc. I think it takes good team effort. In fact, it's essential, a team, that you work together as a team and not to work in silos.
Okay, brilliant. And I want to just segue, because you mentioned the financial management, and I just want to now bring that to Lydia, because Lydia, I've read up on your background. You've got not just sports management experience, you've also got financial management experience. And we always hear these stories about, there's financial misappropriation, there's corruption. What, in your opinion and in your experience, would you say, does it really take someone with good financial management background? Do you have to have that sort of background to make sports administration stronger? what is the cause of all the issues around financial misappropriation? What can associations learn from today, from someone like you on that area?
Beverly, thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. I think from where I'm sitting, it's about ethical leadership. We all have to come from that background, because managing finances, you're always tempted. There is bound to be someone who's tempted to steal a penny here, to steal a penny there. But I think if there are proper policies in place and there is isolation of responsibilities, segregation of duties, the kind of things that we're speaking about, in finance and in audit, that's important to ensure that one person does not do a transaction from the beginning to the end. Absolutely. There's always someone who ticks the boxes here and there to ensure that before a transaction gets through, someone else has had a look. Obviously there is the possibility of collusion between these people that are working together with the finances, but that's what auditors are there for. You have to ensure that you've got an independent audit committee that will look into these things, and you appoint an independent auditor in line with the requirements of the audit compliance documents, to ensure that the auditors are also independent, so that if there is any misappropriation of fund, it's picked up quite early before it gets out of hand.
Fine, fantastic. Now, it sounds to me like we're talking a lot about professionalizing, if that's a word I can use, the game. How do we encourage sports administrators across Africa to see this as a profession just as you would any other? It's not a charity, although it does have its charitable elements, but really, sports is a business as well. And it supports communities, supports building communities. So now I want to ask you, Joe, how do you in Zambia help and support your communities? What is the association doing to support these communities, not just sort of take away from communities? Because again, this complaint about sports administration is one-sided. It's not giving back enough. There's blockades to entry. So what are you doing in Zambia to address some of these challenges that administrators are having around access, finance, working with minimal resources again, I would say?
I think one thing I think we've done in Zambia in the past 4 years or so, we realized that we had done everything through the association, and we didn't have a Premier League. So we came up with a dual strategy. We realized that the association needed to concentrate on development, which speaks to getting to the community. And we strengthened the technical directorate. I think you've seen all what has happened. We strengthened the technical directorate. We've seen the results coming, all the age groups, including the women football. Then on the other side, we also looked at the governance side, and we went the commercialization route. And starting January, we're actually starting with the Zambian Premier League, of which brilliant. I'll be heading as a CEO.
Well done.
And I think recently, we had a partnership with UEFA. They came through. We had the league development program. And one of the things we emphasized on was leadership. And we sat together with the clubs, the top notch. We came up with 4 main goals. Of course, the top one was governance, because that's where the challenges were. The second goal was club development. Then obviously league development. And fourthly, you spoke about finance, income, and marketing. And what you've seen, most clubs are dependent on individuals. We haven't kind of invested in systems. So we are saying we need to up the leadership game. We need to have a strategy. Most clubs don't even have strategy. So we're trying to help them. And then in terms of finance, we are also developing business models. Because you see, we are coming from a history of begging-bowl approach. But now we are teaching them to come up with value proposition so that even when they engage the corporate world, it's a win-win situation. So I think it's going to work out. Brilliant. We are very hopeful, yes.
Brilliant. And there's something you said about changing that begging approach.
Yes.
We want to be more self-sustaining, because it's that lack of self-sustainability that encourages the corruption, the begging, the handouts. Now, Sue, I want to ask you, you've turned things around at COSAFA since you've been there. Can you share with us some of the successful strategies, if you can, to commercialize the game a bit more? He's talked about, we've heard talks about social media. We are not tapping enough into social media. Africa has a young continent. I think half of us are under 30 years of age. How are these associations, how is your regional association tapping into the power of the youth, for instance, to encourage self-sustainability as well?
I think it's firstly got to do with recognizing the value of what you hold, recognizing the value of our properties, because if you don't recognize that and have a passion for it, it's going to be very much, much more difficult to sell. And trying to sell on a regional basis is that much more difficult than selling a national, because a national is a national property. Sponsors will, look at any one of the national teams, and that, that is iconic. They'll want to get behind it. So, with a regional association, it is that much more difficult. But it's, realizing the power that one holds in the properties, and appealing to the right sector of the, of the market, and seeing what their strategies and objectives are. Do they want to move into Africa? So as a regional association, we have, the power to open doors into Africa, not just to be where our headquarters are in South Africa. So it's that. Number two, moving with the times, and over the last 3 years, but even I can say over the last 2 years, we've made an exponential leap into digital content and producing our own digital content, which we put out, on all of our social media platforms, which are slowly growing, because that's what, sponsors, partners are looking for as well, to get their brand across, on the various platforms. Appealing to the youth, of course, but we do from senior men's down to under 17 and a brand new schools tournament. So we've really got a real cross section of properties that are going to appeal to one end of the market or to another. Understanding the objectives of the corporates or the government that one is proposing to. And looking at modern day proposals as opposed to what worked, 20 years ago is not going to work now.
Nice. Now, Lydia, I want to come to you to talk about, you are CEO of COSAFA. That's amazing. We need more women in sport. We need more women sports administrators that are competent. What would your opinion be on how can we change the narrative of attracting more women into the game? You're an ex-player, you were with Bafana, and now you've gone into administration, so you're well placed to understand the pain points, the challenges, and to do something about it. So what would you sort of do? What is your association doing to attract more women into administration?
Yeah, I think it's about being intentional about growing the involvement of women in football. Someone who's playing football right now doesn't just wake up after their football is over and decide they want to go into administration. I think we at the South African Football Association are very privileged because myself coming from a university background, because I've been in university sport for quite a long time, being a product of USA as well. We have connection with quite a few universities. In our Hollywood Bet Super League, the Women's National League, we have 3 university teams participating in that league, and a 4th one, Tax, joining in for being promoted next season. So you have this core group of young women that are at university studying certain courses, whether it be event management, sponsorship, sport management, etc. So they are preparing themselves for life after the game. I think also the kind of programs that COSAFA also runs, with players, current players, preparing them. It's called a career transition program, so that they are aware of the opportunities that exist for them after the football is over. It's quite important that we do that, and that's what we have started doing. I mean, myself, I'm a very big fan of linking education to football, because when I was studying my BCom honors in accounting, I was playing for Banyana. At some point, I was doing my audit articles at the same time with EY. So I go out there and speak to the girls that are at university, and also those that are at university as well, because you have to. The last thing you want is to see another girl or any football player who's on the street after their football career is over. I think I'm speaking more from a women's football perspective, because that's where I'm heavily involved. With the men, it's quite a bit different, because at least they've got a professional league. They know that, now once they leave university, they've got a professional league they can play in. Whereas the league that we're running now, it's semi-professional. It's only a handful of players that get paid. A lot of them don't get paid. So it's about us preparing them for life after their football is over. And, mentoring, I'm a big fan of mentoring. A lot of players know that, they chat to me a lot, and I give them advice in terms of what needs to be done. But whenever there's a course that talks about, life after football, or anything that we're preparing now, a course coming up, for football administrators that are going to come on, in February. So we want to bring current players on board, so that they can know that after football, you don't necessarily have to be a coach. Not all of us can be coaches. We need a lot of administrators. And when we go out there looking for administrators, we find that a lot of our footballers do not have the background that is required to do office work. Office work is not for everybody. I think you know that. Doing a 9 to 5 is not for everybody. It becomes tedious at some point. It becomes challenges, the policies and procedures one has to abide by. And if someone is not used to that, they tend to fall up, out of the system quite easily, because, there's crosses and balances that, checks and balances that they need to abide by. So I think it's about us preparing them. At some point, with one of our sponsors, we had a mentorship program with our girls in football, so that, we give them a taste of what it feels like to be in the office space, so that, should they ever want to come on board, then they have had a taste, so that, it doesn't catch them by surprise.
Nice. I like that.
Beverley, if I can just hone in on what Lydia was saying. It's all very well having women come into the association, to any business, but if we're just talking about the association specifically. But when they're there, they need to be given the tools. They need to feel a real part, of it. And we do find, within the football structures, that women are there, but they are often tokens. So last year, COSAFA embarked on an online women leadership program. And we've done it again this year. We're just about, it'll finish at the end of the month. And it's been a resounding success. We have topics across the spectrum, whether it is giving them practical tools. We're talking about administration and management and financial management or governance. We're talking about communications, etc. But it's also dealing with emotional intelligence, on leadership, how to lead a team, etc. So that the lady who is supposedly running the football, the women's department, is not just actually running the women's desk, and that's where she may remain, for the foreseeable future. So it's to give the tools to empower them with confidence, with knowledge, in being able to really, take their place, and make themselves heard. They may have a lot to offer, but unfortunately, it is. Sorry, Joe. It is still a male-dominated world.
Yes.
We are doing everything that we can, to try and change it, and change is happening. But it'll still take a little while. So it's no good just having, whether it's ex-footballers or anybody else, in the association, so that you can tick the box and say, yes, we're for gender equity here. but it's getting the most out of everybody, so that it's a win-win.
Exactly. Okay, so, I mean, I like what you've said, because I was actually going to come in and ask Joe about what are associations doing with regards to this, I would say, flight, that the typical African dream for a footballer is, I want to go to Europe, I want to go to Europe. How do we change this? How do we break that? People have said on this stage that Africa is full of, there's no short supply of talented players. Yet, the goal remains Europe. Not here. I mean, if you get to play here, it's fantastic, but they don't take it as a thing of pride. Why are players always looking for any means possible to leave the shores of Africa? What can associations do? I love what you said about the upskilling, capacity building, education, and it sounds very much like that's part of the agenda to get more women on board. But we care about the men and the women in football. It takes both sides. So what are associations doing to really stem that trend of any means possible, I'm out? And then, of course, you know what happens. There's football slavery, there's football trafficking. This happens disproportionately to African footballers, the human rights abuses, and you name it. So what are these what is your association? I mean, I want to put all of you perhaps on the spot a little bit, because these are the realities of what's happening under your noses, really. So maybe I'll start with you, Joseph.
I think to start with, like we alluded to, it starts with leadership. When we talk about leadership, I spoke about strategy.
Yes.
How do we translate that strategy into operational teams? Because you see, we have invested in people. You find our leaders, they are bosses. When they are up there, it's about them. Even their leadership is based on their authority instead of the knowledge that they have and their character. So I think we need to start with the leadership. That's the key. Because once we do that, it connects with the people they are leading. You'll get a line of sight. And then also in terms of prioritization, we tend to wake up haphazardly. I learned a lot. I think I'll keep referring to UEFA, because I learned a lot. The partnership that we have is when I talk about prioritizing, if you look, obviously you divide internally and externally. To start with externally, I think we are more focused on the short term externally, which is the results. We just want results. The national team has to win. We don't look at the process. We only look at the destination. You know, life is a journey.
Yes.
But you see, we need to qualify when we talk about externally, what of the long term, which is long-term development plans. And this is where the strategy is, beyond the results. But it's like all African countries. This is why, you know, the Europeans have got all the fallings. I'll come to the other two. When you look at internal, in the short term, the processes, do you have the necessary processes? We have even a guide in club licensing. Club licensing talks about everything, talk about administration, talk about the legal, but how many clubs are doing?
Exactly.
You get the point? And in terms of adherence, my belief is that people won't do what you expect them to do. People, you do what you expect of them. So some countries, you know, like Uganda, have done very well in terms of club licensing. Then obviously, again, internally, long term, you're talking about the culture. Are we developing that right culture? So I think this is where we get it wrong. And then in terms of sustainability, I'll give an example of ourselves, Zambia. We won the Africa Cup. And then in 2012, 2017, we win the under-20. But where was the transition? No sustainability. But you see, once we've got the leadership right, we invest in systems, we'll have that sustainability. How will the sustainability come? We've got to have continuous improvement. We need to be responsive. We need to start sensing the weak signals, which is risk management. So if we get all the things right, I think we'll be there and about. We will see reverse. But I'm glad to see when we're doing we're on a mentorship, the Zambian Premier League, we're starting in January. We're on a mentorship with UEFA. We did a commendable document on the youth soccer. The experts actually asked for a document. I said, oh, this is brilliant. Is it okay if we share it? For me, that showed me that we can still do it. I think also, sorry to say, I think we need to do away also with the inferiority complex.
Oh, yes.
I'm a very focused person. I believe in getting things done, and that's about execution. Yes.
If I can just from my association's perspective, I think for us, we don't have a problem in the men's section where the men are leaving for Europe, to play in Europe, because our Premier Soccer League is so strong, and the opportunities are there, in terms of compensation and, the environment for our football players, the men football players, that actually is a problem for us, that they're not actually wanting to go see what else is out there, But it gives us comfort, because then it means that there is, an environment suitable for a male football players, a male football player to ply their trade in South Africa and stay here, remain here, and close to their family, and, plow back to their own communities. But the challenge that, we started seeing, it's in the women's football, because a lot of our women football players now are leaving the continent to go play in Spain, in Sweden, in etc., China, etc., because that's where there are professional leagues, if you look at Asisat Oshoala, she's making such good money coming from Nigeria, going to Barcelona, if you look at from our side, Lydia Monyepao has left. She is now playing a trade in Italy, etc. There's many players that have now left, following the previous World Cup. They've been scouted and playing overseas. But what does that do to us? It's that, the quality of football in our own country sort of goes down, because you are losing quality players to go overseas. It works for the national team because then you are getting strong on a national team level, but you also want to build up the majority of your girls that are, playing in the local league. So it's quite important for us, it's something that as the South African Football Association are really focusing on, so that by 2026 at least, the girls are making a decent living out of playing football, so that they don't have to all, leave and go to Spain to look for opportunities, or wherever in Europe or in the USA. But I think it's for us as the Football Association to create that environment, to be intentional about professionalizing women's football. I think we all know that's the direction that, FIFA is moving towards, that's the direction that CAF is moving towards. I mean, COSAFA has been really instrumental in ensuring that, our girls are getting a lot of exposure in terms of, the quality, access to quality competitions as well. They are seen, and, it's really working for us, but they're still not making money out of it. For us, it's about, building that product, and attracting the sponsors to come on board, so that, once we get more people on board as sponsors, then we can, the money can trickle down to the clubs, and it can trickle down to the players, and they can get, rewarded for their talents, and they don't have to leave the continent.
Exactly. I like that. That risk and reward. Somebody else alluded to that in the previous session. Risk and reward. We need to set up that risk and reward structure better in African football, so people don't see the need to leave, But Sue, I wanted you to also...
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Lydia has said, is in terms of having leagues and professionalizing the leagues, which even in the men's section, in many countries in Africa, they are not professional. They may be totally unprofessional, they may be semi-professional. So it's building that, and particularly in the women. CAF last year organized for the first time a club, a women's Champions League, which, if anybody in Africa has just been watching, you will have seen that taking place in Morocco, and the results, there. So, those are kind of the top echelon now. We want that to trickle down to all clubs in all of the associations. It's going to take time. It does take money. I think it starts, we do the zonal qualifier each year. We went backwards this year in terms of participation. Last year we had 7 teams. This year we had 6 teams. Why? Last year was a peg in the ground. The regulations in terms of licensing and what have you was, they allowed a little leeway. This year they tightened the screws. and it found a lot of our associations wanting. They haven't licensed their clubs. So it goes back to, to club licensing and club licensing of the men. Men's clubs that want to participate in the Continental Championship at club level have to now have a women's section. But that's not good enough, because the women's section, whether it is a section of Mamelodi Sundowns or whether it is a standalone club, needs to be licensed. How do they get licensed? They need to, follow the criteria in terms of management and sporting and the various criteria. So it is going to take a little time. We, as the regional association, have accepted that we've got a lot of work to do with our member associations to be, begging, cajoling, educating, bringing out the big stick, to get them, to pay attention and license the club so that those clubs can participate. Of course, once they're participating, that, from our perspective now, we're intent, on securing sponsorship specifically for our women's game, so that we can introduce prize money, because it sticks in the throat that we don't have prize money for our women's competitions right now. We need to have it, so that it's motivational, and in terms of the clubs, it actually literally pays for the preparation, of getting the team here, and then could, assist in buying players and what have you. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it's only through the professionalization of the game, and ultimately the leagues, like Lydia was saying, and thanks to the sponsor that they've got for their national league, which I think started last year, did it, Lydia?
We started in 2019, and there was
with
a break.
Yes, yeah. It's only, with leagues like that and, professionalizing, sponsors see, I'd like to be associated with that. Come on board, television, more money, pay the players, so that they can actually remain on their home continent.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if they don't see the value, if the sponsors don't see the value, they won't come. They won't come. And like you said, it's not even just the women's game. The men's game too needs to be better professionalized. But I think the question I would also like to pose now is, what are associations doing to curb unethical practices? What are they doing to curb? Fine, some are not even licensed in the first place, but the problem is there's still a proliferation of these clubs. How can they be weeded out? How can enforcement become stronger? Because the truth is, regulation, a regulated environment is what will give a stronger, more sustainable football industry, right? And football has kind of lagged behind in Africa as an industry, vis-a-vis other industries like finance, etc. So what can football do? What can the leadership do now to begin to strengthen, the regulatory structures? It's not just about throwing more rules and regulations, but culture. We've talked about the culture. How can we change the culture of haphazard? I think you alluded to that. How can we really change this culture once and for all?
I think to start with, you start with the leaders at the entry level. As Zambia, we took a bold decision. When it comes to electing leaders, we came up with the integrity test. I think we're the first in Africa. We're very bold about it, and we saw, I think, CAF also taking up that. Then we had the ethics committee, which has done commendably well, and we also we had to upgrade our code of ethics. So we're quite stringent now, even clubs. I think in this season, any crowd trouble, we are punishing them heavily. So I think with that, we expect that we'll see the positive signs coming up.
They'll sit up,
Yes, they're already sitting up.
It's good, it's
Yes.
good, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, similar to what FAIRS is doing. We've got a very strong ethics committee now that we established about 2 years ago, to ensure that, any corrupt activities, they're picked up quite early, and, whistleblowing is how you actually get to know about, what is happening, behind the scenes, because more often than not, people don't want to come forward with you knowing that it's Sue who's coming to, tell on Lydia that she's doing something wrong. We establish a whistleblowing hotline where people can call in to say, and anonymously give us tip-offs in terms of what is happening, corrupt activities. And we found that a lot of the corrupt activities that are happening, it's where in the leagues where promotion is at stake. A lot of the clubs want to be promoted from us, it's ABC Motsepe to the NFD League or the Motsepe League, and from the Motsepe League to the PSL. You'll find a lot of clubs taking chances, in those leagues. So it's quite important that we know what's happening. People come forward, and then they point the finger at the people that are trying to be unethical about what is happening there. So otherwise you're going to end up promoting clubs that don't actually deserve to be promoted. But you end up promoting clubs that have got money because they're paying bribes, the exchange of money, etc., which is very unethical. It's something that we want to discourage. We want only the best teams to be promoted. So that's from our side. The ethics committee has been really critical for us. The whistleblowing hotline, and encouraging people to come forward anonymously, to give us tip-offs. But it's quite important as well in the training of our referees, because people will tell you that the referees are the ones that peddle some of these things. It's quite important that you have ethical referees, and it's in the training, so that and you pay them well. You have to pay them well, because then they don't get attracted to the brown envelope that someone wants to put behind their backs, so that they think that they're making good money, over and above what they get between the four white lines. So it's quite important that you reward them as well for what they're doing. You don't just give them peanuts. You appreciate the kind of work that they're doing, and then they're not tempted into getting into corrupt activities.
Okay. Now I want to talk about player welfare. This is a really sticky point for a lot of associations. Then after that, I'm going to bring the role of CAF, because we can't ignore CAF at all. Associations need to talk to each other more, and additionally, they also need to take direction from somewhere. But with regards to player welfare, Sue, we know the situation. We know generally the African player situation with player welfare, perhaps more in sub-Saharan Africa, which is where I am from. What would you say, what's your opinion on the state of player welfare as it is now in African football, and what can be done to improve it vis-a-vis other jurisdictions abroad, etc.?
Well, as you know, FIFA a year or two ago brought in safeguarding. They've given another name, but CAF has now adopted safeguarding as a policy, and are really pushing it from a continental perspective. We've just recently done the inaugural CAF African Schools Football Championship as a zonal, which we did in Malawi, and one of the regulations of that competition, whether it's done at the national phase and then cascading right up, is that every school, bearing in mind these are all schools that are participating, every school, boys and girls, has to have, as part of their team, a safeguarding officer. So for the girls, it's a female safeguarding officer. For the boys, it's obviously a male. And having the schools all coming to Malawi, where we did the zonal competition, there was a safeguarding workshop that was rolled out to the safeguarding officers, number one, and then to the boys and the girls separately, and talking to the boys and the girls about what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, how to recognize, etc., and likewise to the officers themselves. But it goes further than that. That FIFA offers an online safeguarding course, which any of our safeguarding officers needs ultimately to do. At COSAFA, we've got our own safeguarding officers, and they have both done the course. So I think that needs to be inculcated now at a national association level. So CAF has set the policy. It's got to filter through. We're starting at the school level, and I think going back to general whatever you put under the umbrella of corruption or anything that that could be construed as such, needs to also start at a school level. There needs to be an education process for our young players, from the age of 12. What is acceptable and what is not acceptable? Our young referees program, as part of the schools program, there's a young referees program, and we saw some of the referees that were doing a program in Malawi. They are 14, 15, 16 years old. We need to start at that level, to be talking about acceptable behavior. And looking after their welfare as well, because they're also kids. So it's really about looking after their safety from various aspects, from trafficking, as you say, from overworking. Some coaches, you hear horror stories where the kids, particularly sometimes in academies, which is nothing against academies because there's a big place for them, but it can be too much of the same. They are forced to train all hours that God gave, and leave out the school, the time for schoolwork. So what is that doing to the player? That they're not being educated at the same time. So their transition becomes even more difficult. So it's sexual harassment, it's all manner of things which is dealt with under the safeguarding policy that that we have to be concerned about. And the other thing, which is a personal hobby horse of mine, is nutrition. So it all comes under player welfare. We are expecting wonders from these, from the children, from the youth, from whatever, but we don't. And circumstance is, of course, but we are, have been in touch with an online university in the UK that we are talking to about a diploma of sports science, and one of them, one of the modules that will be, form part of our diploma will be on nutrition. Nice. Of course, it's important to look at your target audience and to say, the needs analysis and the food reserves and what is available, what is not available, what is affordable and not affordable, and to create a suitable diet for these children that they can perform against. Because when we see some of the the teams coming into our tournaments, whether it is under 17 or whether it's at a senior level, believe me, there's no nutrition ever been discussed. You get some teams that are really rigid, even with the senior men, and there's a diet plan, there's a menu plan, etc. But on the other end of the scale is anything goes. Yes. So I think nutrition is really something that we need to be focusing on more at a national level, and certainly when it comes into regional tournaments, into continental tournaments, where maybe there's a little bit extra resources, is to have workshops, with the technical team that's coming from, with the players, yes, and talking about nutrition and how that ultimately helps in the sports science of it.
Thank you so much, Sue. Unfortunately, our time is up. We've already overrun by 1:30. I want to thank my brilliant panelists. Thank you so much. And David is already
I'm primed, but let's give it up for the panel, guys. Thank you very much indeed. Beverley, once again, thank you very much for chairing the conversation. Off you go. Wonderful, wonderful conversation. Again, I mean, I just think the insights that we're getting from our guests here, really worth trying to capture them as much as you can. Obviously, one of the things to mention to you guys is that after WFS Africa concludes tomorrow evening, eventually all of the content from these last 2 days will be made available online. So you'll be able to watch it there again and glean even more insights and incredible commentaries on all the topics that we're discussing. And from that last one, I think, one of the things that Sue said that really grabbed me was recognize the value of what you hold, because if you don't recognize it and have a passion for it, it'll be very difficult to sell. I mean, it's in some ways a very obvious thing to say, but in other ways, I think it's something we have to absolutely recognize. Back yourselves. You have something of real value. Back yourselves to love it, and then you will attract the attention to it from those who also want to invest in it. And we picked up again on that topic of women in football. And it's all very well having women come to the organisations. This is Sue Destombes again. But when they're there, they need to be given the tools. They need to play a real part to empower them with confidence, with knowledge, and to make them feel heard. And also, this knowledge of reward. I think the risk and reward has come up before, as Beverley noted. It sticks in our throat that we don't have prize money for our women's competitions right now. Well, do you know what? It's taken Europe some time to get up to that point as well and to fully professionalise the game, particularly in the women's segment of it. But it serves as motivation, to have that prize money. And again, Lydia as well on this topic, having more women at the top of sports organisations, it's about being intentional, about growing the involvement of women in football. As someone who's playing football now doesn't just suddenly wake up and decide they want to go into administration. It's important to link education to football. Again, that's a theme that I think we'll see develop over the remainder of this WFS Africa event as well. Education in all senses. The game itself, whatever role you play within it, but especially in terms of young people and linking that to football, because it's just such an amazing vehicle to convey that message. And also about there towards the end, player welfare. And I'm sure that we could have heard much, much more from Beverley and her panel.